Man, they real man, not with the gay shit. You niggas sick and gross me out, transforming into a bitch. I don't want that dirty pussy, little mama. I ain't spending no a trick. Don't need you to put me on. I put myself on. Just came up on another lick. Bills paid, belly full, in lack for nothing. Nigga, do me, stay in my lane. Fuck tryna be another nigga with nothing. Brainwashed and continue lied to our social media. Censor everything real good into destruction.
Talking about a possible World War III for decades. During the Cold War between Russia and the US, World War III was on the brink of becoming a reality. Fast forward 60 years to now, and we're back on the brink of a possible Third World War. Except this time, advanced nuclear technology means we're in a whole different playing field. Today, we're looking at how the threat of nuclear World War III is impacting the car industry right now. We'll look at how much the car manufacturer makes when a consumer buys a car, and the first jobs car companies will cut if we do end a nuclear war. I'll also tell you which car companies are at risk of going bankrupt in the next 2 years. Stay tuned because the list might surprise you. The global pandemic changed the car industry. Factories, showrooms, and dealerships shut down in an instant. U.S. car sales plummeted 40% in a month. In Chicago, LA, and Atlanta, traffic went down 70%, and many people liked it. Now we survived the pandemic, and everyone's trying to return back to normal. When car factories reopened their doors, they were met with shortages of key parts and labor, and consumers were met with disappearing cars. In 2021, there were about 1 million less vehicles than normal on dealer lots, and we're still seeing parts and car shortages today. At the same time, demand for consumer electronics shot up, and so did demand for semiconductor chips. That's one of the reasons why the car industry has been suffering from a shortage of semiconductor chips. This year in 2022, car prices have been at record-breaking all-time highs because of high demand and global shortage of computer chips. With car prices as high as they are now, how much profit are car makers making from them anyway? Most consumers think that car manufacturers get between 10 to 20% on every new car they make. The truth is, it really depends on the manufacturer and the model. The top premium brands make around 20% in profit. Porsche is considered by most analysts to be the car maker with the top profit margin. Porsche makes a profit around 20% or more on a model's retail price, but other brands make about 10% or lower. Now, that's not necessarily a bad profit margin. In fact, in 2020, the average profit margin for car manufacturers was only 5%, and that's after spending billions of dollars on research, development, infrastructure, and other expenses. How expensive is it to produce a car anyway? Well, every car maker has two types of costs: fixed costs and variable costs. Fixed costs are mandatory costs that stay the same regardless of the number of cars manufactured. This includes things like the cost of maintaining a facility, finding suppliers, building and testing prototypes, training workers, and adding new tools and technology. Research and development is another important fixed cost. Every time a car maker decides to make a new model, they need to do research and development and thorough testing. In some cases, research and development can take years to complete. Research and development makes around 6% of the total production costs. In 2020, Volkswagen allocated $16.5 billion for research and development. That came out to around 7.6% of their revenue. But it's Tesla that actually spends more in research and development per car than any other automaker by a long shot per car. Tesla spends a total of $2,984 on research and development. That comes out to 3 times the industry average of about $1,000 a car. That figure is also higher than the collective research and development budgets of GM, Ford, and Chrysler. Tesla also spends the least in advertising per car sold. And then there are variable costs. Variable costs change depending on the volume of cars produced. Raw materials, labor, and distribution are all variable costs. So if a car maker decides to produce more cars, they'll need to hire more workers, and so labor costs go up. Skyrocketing oil and new raw material costs due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine is another example of the volatility of variable costs. Raw materials make up about 47% of the manufacturing cost. Steel alone can be almost 22% of a company's operational costs. Direct labor can make up about 21% of the total cost of making a car. Labor costs are usually per hour. In general, it takes about 17 to 18 hours to assemble parts of a car. And for smaller cars, the assembling process can take 11 to 12 hours. The average Ford car today sells for around $22,000. In 2017, Ford's profit margin was just around 5% before taxes. So if Ford were to sell a $22,000 vehicle, they'd make a profit of around $1,100 and a gross margin of $2,200, which in retrospect isn't as high as you may have thought initially. So let's put it all together. If there's a nuclear war, which of these expenses would car makers cut first? Since Tesla is already spending the least in advertising costs, and they're at the top of the EV game, you can see that advertising cost is less of an imperative to them. If there's a nuclear war, we'll be seeing far less car ads. So if you're a car company with facilities in the country that faces war or nuclear threat, well, obviously you'll consider relocating your operation to a safer, less politically volatile country. That's why Daimler Truck, Ferrari, Ford, Mercedes-Benz, Stellantis, Toyota, Volkswagen, and Volvo has either pulled out of Russia or limited their exports to Russia. Another cost that can be cut is human resources and labor costs in the event of nuclear war. It's not unheard of to see massive layoffs. And if the Russian oil sanctions have taught us anything, it's that a car company may not even have a choice on which expenses to cut. For example, say the country supplying the raw materials you need for your car is suddenly no longer an option. Even though you have the funds to buy more materials, now you've lost your supplier. So you have to find an alternative source. In the meantime, you have to figure out how to prioritize the materials you have left. Here's a question. Is it possible for a major car company to go completely bankrupt? Believe it or not, yes. It's easier to go bankrupt than you might think. Take Aston Martin, for example. Since 1913, they've gone bankrupt 7 times. It first went bankrupt all the way back in 1924 when it was owned by Lionel Martin. A few bankruptcies later, the company was bought by David Brown. By 1972, David Brown was actually able to pay off all of Aston Martin's debts. But only 2 years later, in 1974, the company was back in bankruptcy. Or look at Lamborghini. It's been sold 5 times since 1963. After going bankrupt in 1978, the ownership of Lamborghini bounced around from company to company. Finally, the company was taken over by Volkswagen in 1998. Volkswagen had just placed Lamborghini under the control of the Audi Group, which gave the brand name a boost in sales they needed. Since then, Lamborghini's vehicle sales only noticeably dropped for a short time after the 2008 financial crisis. Even a singular car model itself can be enough to bankrupt the company. A case in point is the DeLorean DMC-12. It was at the height of popularity after it was featured in the cult classic movie Back to the Future. Former GM executive and engineer John DeLorean established the company back in 1975 with an investment sum of over $200 million. Yet despite all that dough, DeLorean declared bankruptcy due to low demand and legal issues when its owner John DeLorean was arrested in 1982. Or take, for example, the Hummer H2. It was instantly a bestseller. At its peak, over 70,000 units were sold. Celebrities like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Eminem, and LeBron James were just some of the famous names who got a Hummer H2 of their own. But then GM Hummer's parent brand went bankrupt thanks to the 2007 recession, emissions concerns, and a few bad financial decisions. By 2009, GM had completely shut down all production of the Hummer the next year. Did you know that back in March 2021, Elon Musk tweeted that Tesla and Ford are the only American companies that have not gone bankrupt out of thousands of car startups? He added that prototypes are easy to create, but production is hard, and being cash flow positive is excruciating. So, which car company will be the next on the bankruptcy radar? Car analysts say that Tesla has a less than 1% probability of bankruptcy in the next 2 years, but Volkswagen has a 73% chance of financial distress. And if Volkswagen doesn't experience financial troubles, then Daimler and Ford are the next expected companies with a 49% probability of financial distress. We can actually learn a few things by looking at the Vietnam War. In 1965, the U.S. officially entered the war after North Vietnam's attack on military ship. U.S. involvement ended in 1973, and the war officially ended 2 years later in 1975. But the Vietnam War had a bigger impact on the U.S. economy as a whole than you might know. Factories that were producing consumer goods started to produce items and weapons for the military, and all that money was going overseas for the military that helped lower the value of the U.S. dollar. Since no corresponding money was being sent back, the U.S. economy faced a real strain. And of course, inflation only increased due to increased domestic social spending and budget deficits. Did you know that during the war, Vietnam was the most heavily bombed country in history? Over 6.1 million tons of bombs were dropped. In comparison, some 2.1 million tons of bombs were dropped in World War II. Along with millions of deaths, the Vietnam War also caused a world of trouble for the car industry. For example, after 114 years in the industry, U.S. automaker Studebaker went bankrupt and closed their doors in March 1966. But the Hummer is a different story. The car actually traces its roots back to just after the Vietnam War. After the war, the U.S. military ditched the Jeep as their go-to vehicle. Jeeps no longer had the power the military wanted, and they also had no armor. So in the 1980s, the U.S. military started looking for a more heavy-duty option. Pentagon gave AM General a $1 billion contract to develop a fleet of high-mobility, multi-purpose wheeled vehicles to transfer troops and cargo. These were eventually known as Humvees. Did you know that while filming the movie Kindergarten Cop in Oregon, Arnold Schwarzenegger saw Humvees driving by and decided it was his new dream car? He later said in '91 that the Humvee reminded him of the tanks he drove when he was serving in the Austrian Austrian army. The actor ended up becoming the first civilian to own a specifically made Humvee. AM General even went so far as stenciling him the word Terminator on his Humvee. A year later, in 1992, a civilian version of the Humvee hit the market. It was renamed as the Hummer, and if you wanted to get your hands on one, you were looking at a price tag of up to $100 grand. So anyway, what if a nuclear World War III happened tomorrow? Well, just the threat of a possible nuclear war was enough to get Elon Musk to initially drop his plan to buy Twitter. At least that's what his text messages say. Musk signed an agreement back in April to buy Twitter and make the company private. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, Musk backed out of the $44 billion agreement. In July, Musk told Twitter that he was officially backing out because they had wrongfully withheld data on bots and spam accounts. And then Twitter sued him for backing out. Later, during the hearings in September, text messages from the tech billionaire came to light that seemed to explain the real reason why he decided not to buy Twitter. In a text to one of his Morgan Stanley lenders on May 8th, Musk said it wouldn't make sense to buy Twitter if we're all heading to World War III. Instead, he said they should slow down a few days because Putin was set to do a public speech the following day. Sure enough, on May 9th, Putin gave the speech on the 77th anniversary of the Allied victory over Nazi Germany. And in the speech, Putin said that Russia's decision to invade Ukraine back in February was the only right decision and that the West was preparing for an invasion of Russia. Of course, Musk's lawyer later said that the text was taken out of context. But say Musk really did back out of the Twitter agreement because of the threat of World War III. What's to stop other major companies from doing the same in their current deals? Could the threat of this nuclear war put any major deals or company acquisitions on hold for the time being? And could it also make car companies slow down their plans for their future vehicles and expansion? No one knows for sure, but it is a possibility. If this war does begin, countless millions of people will die, and the Earth will take decades or maybe even centuries to recover. Once nuclear weapons get involved, the devastating global impacts would mean that no one would really win the war. If World War III does happen, the entire world will never be.
These two events, amongst others, that will happen, they will affect every man, woman, and child on this earth for one reason or multiple reasons. I mean, we know it's going to happen. We just don't know the timing of when. But one thing is for certain. When you are awake to what is happening in this world, and you are not allowing yourself to be led by these wolves, you can see and feel the deception. It's so strong. I mean, it often feels physical. We are consumed by lies. It feels like, at this current point in time, nothing in the mainstream is true. And pretty much everything we hear in the mainstream is made up and centered around lies. It's all scripted or covered up around deception. Our television and movies are completely evil. I mean, it is extremely dangerous to go to the movies today because they are literally casting spells on the audience right in the open. I hear that movie Black Adam had a total satanic twist. Today, our people are so ignorant and they lack education, so much so that these wicked leaders and businesses can create content that will make these people watch and support and promote movies that were made about the people who helped put their ancestors in captivity. I have not watched it yet because, like I said, I will not go to a movie theater. But the movie Woman King, besides the fact that they are working against our men, demasculizing them and making our women feel that they are stronger than the men, this movie was about a tribe of people that sold the Negroes into slavery. You are in America now complaining about inequality and the fact that we were slaves because of these people. And you all go around praising this movie. It's pure ignorance. They have gotten you to love your oppressors. It's pure manipulation. Ridiculous. But let's talk about something else. Our sports. Our sports are completely manipulated. For me, I can't even watch it anymore because it's just all fake. You really think gambling is legal now because they can't control it? They only legalized it because they can control it. And let's talk about our news. This is where we're supposed to get our information from. The news isn't news anymore. It's just pure mental manipulation and propaganda. They only tell you about what they want us to know, and they tell us how they want us to feel about it. These news anchors read scripts, period. That's all they do. They are professional readers who read what those in the background making the scripts want us to know and believe. Like with the story about Kanye. If they really thought these views were a real threat, they wouldn't even give it airtime. They don't speak about the truth, they hide it. If it is a true threat to their facade, they will never talk about it. You know it's manipulation because they're giving it airtime. If you don't understand that, it's because you don't understand them. Or like with this news about Elon Musk and Twitter. The only reason they are emphasizing and highlighting this in this manner is because they're using it as a mass introduction to Web3, a topic I spoke about in another video. They are just guiding people in the direction they are heading towards. It's all a part of their narrative. But the truth, they are concealing. I mean, listen, people are dropping dead. Literally, people are dropping dead. And the big elephant in the room is not even mentioned. Like, why all of a sudden are people having heart attacks and dropping dead? Back in the day, the real news, investigative journalism, would be investigating this and looking at the common denominator that is linked to all these people. What did all these people put in their body recently that might be affecting them all the same?
Really consider the actual warning signs of what's going on in the world today, right here in the US of A, in our economy. This is a huge warning about the future of our economy and the potential pitfalls and further struggles that are going to be placed on U.S. American citizens as we continue on to fight through diesel shortages, price increases, inflation, price fixing, price gouging, higher interest rates, all seemingly so interconnected and intertwined with one another, with the sole purpose of basically crushing and collapsing families, financial budgets and savings and credit balances to the point of no return, while banks are going to capitalize on these opportunities and make hay on the rates and fees and interest that they're going to receive, which they may or may not have some interconnection with government and politics and lawmakers and, folks that have control over interest rates and things like that. While businesses are having their costs, their inflationary costs somewhat covered, if not completely covered, while still charging more and more and more for the same goods and products and services that everyone needs on a daily basis, particularly being food. Now, the beauty of it is what possible global situation, maybe even national, localized situation can we manufacture so that we can justify the increase in price, or at least the postponement of a reduction in price? Oh, I know what it is. Let's say we're running out of diesel fuel. Great. I like that. I like that idea. We're running out of diesel fuel. So that way we can charge more for the fuel. That way we can charge more for, we're not running out of gas, folks. We're not running out of gasoline. Gasoline doesn't transport food and necessities and supplies to stores. Gasoline doesn't keep this country running. Diesel does. Diesel feeds America. Diesel runs the farming equipment. Diesel fuel is what allows business
shortages that are coming. You'll have people who may not understand what you mean when you say prepare. I know that there's only a little bit of preparation that some can do. But when I say prepare, I'm like, hey, do something, whether it's storing water, buying extra reserves of water in bottles or whatever. All I'm saying is do something, because when these situations come upon us and it becomes an emergency, it may get to the point where there won't be any outside help. Now, there's a reason why, of course, in this video, I'm going to be talking about skimflation and what that is. Of course, we know that they've put out movies over the years where they will show scenarios of what they are pretty much telling you is going to be happening in the future. Where water is going to be in such short order that to buy just a little sip of water is going to be a lot of money, right? And people are going to be fighting over it, of course, and all kinds of other things. They put this stuff in the movies for a reason, because they already know the direction that the world is heading. And besides that, a lot of things have been prophesied. In the Bible, you'll read about a lot of these things. This is why it's very important to stay in the know. But anyway, what is skimflation? That's what we're going to be getting in. into today, but of course you can tell by the way it sounds that it has something to do with something being skimpy and inflation. It's like a combination of the two words, and so that can kind of lead you into the direction of what we're going to be talking about. So let's get into this. So skimflation is talking about brands maybe changing their recipes to cut costs. But it's hard to tell sometimes because the packages usually stay the same. So it says increasing prices and changing products and packaging can be hard to navigate when you're trying to keep costs down. So a trip to the grocery store is an expensive endeavor these days. And with food prices surging, everyone is on the lookout for deals and ways to save. But there's something else you should be looking for, changes to your favorite products. You've probably heard of shrinkflation. That's when manufacturers downsize products so you're getting less but paying the same price. Okay, I'm familiar with that one, y'all, breaking away from the article for a moment, but I'm familiar with that because I remember back in the day, a little small bag of chips, real small, 2 or 3 ounces, used to be like 15 cents. Now that same bag of chips, you'd be lucky if you pay $1.99 for it. You know, sometimes the price is higher than that. But that was shrinkflation. So now we're talking about skimflation. So they're asking, but have you heard about skimflation? So here it goes. In my opinion, both ways are very deceptive, especially the skimflation I'm about to talk about, because they are giving you the same size package, same ounces and everything, but something else is going on, y'all. So it says longtime consumer advocate Edgar Dvorsky, or Dworsky, has kept a watchful eye on grocery store products for 3 decades. He spotlighted shrinking products for years on the consumerworld.org website and is now sounding the alarm about changing recipes and formulas. This is now called skimflation, which means a manufacturer has reformulated one of his products, usually with cheaper ingredients. Okay, it's a relatively new term. It was coined just a couple of years ago, and it's really hard to detect. Dworsky says a recent change made to Smart Balance margarine, which now lists water as the first ingredient, is a good example of it. It says this is 164% oil, he says, holding up to margarine containers. This one, the new container, is 39% oil. The package looks almost identical. The manufacturer, ConAgra, decided to save a little money because substituting water for oil is cheap. So they literally watered down the margarine. Okay. The trouble is consumers noticed and complained a lot. Okay. So the company's website has hundreds of 1-star reviews posted about the change. Customers called it a disgusting new recipe, a big terrible mistake, and that they ruined a good taste. So that kind of gives you an idea of what they're doing. They're trying to water down things or switch out ingredients for cheaper things, alternating things, or, just totally removing some items altogether. So that's one of the deceptive things that are happening because they want to keep the price low. So in order to do that, well, not really low because the prices are already ridiculous. They're trying to keep them at the same level that they are currently without driving it up too much. So they're skimping on other things, right? But anyway, back to the article. Okay, increasing prices and changing products and packages can be hard to navigate when you're trying to keep costs down. It's a real challenge to try to get the best deal in stores. You just really have to be as alert as you possibly can be. Look for great deals where possible. Still use coupons and all of that good stuff. If you suspect a favorite product has changed and you're not happy about it, post a review on the company website or reach out to them and ask if they've made a change and share your thoughts. So anyway, this is what is happening right now. Again, so much is happening in the world and people are not paying attention. Most people can care less what's in the ingredients section of their packaged goods. All they know is they like the way it tastes, or they're used to buying it. Though they don't even notice the change for some people, because they want the convenience and they really don't look at the ingredient package. But more and more people are starting to say, I need to know what's going in my body. What are these people feeding me? I need to do some research.